The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the white tablecloths at Harborview Terrace, the most elegant restaurant on the Marina Bay waterfront. Victoria Hayes smoothed her emerald dress nervously, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of coral and gold through the floor-to-ceiling windows. This was her third date with Owen Mitchell, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt something close to hope flickering in her chest. Owen sat across from her, his warm brown eyes crinkling at the corners as he laughed at something she had said about Sophie's latest obsession with building elaborate blanket forts. He had a way of making everything feel lighter, easier. His navy blazer was slightly rumpled, and there was still a faint chalk dust mark on his sleeve from the classroom. Details that made him feel real and safe. "I think your daughter might be destined for architecture, just like her mother," Owen said, reaching across the table to gently touch her hand. The gesture was simple, but it sent warmth flooding through Victoria's entire body. She had forgotten what it felt like to be touched with such genuine affection. The waiter arrived with their appetizers, setting down plates of seared scallops and wild mushroom risotto with practiced elegance. The aroma was intoxicating, garlic and butter mingling with the salt air drifting through the partially open terrace doors. Other diners murmured around them, couples celebrating anniversaries, business partners closing deals, families marking special occasions. The sudden intrusion Victoria had just lifted her fork when the restaurant's atmosphere shifted dramatically. The main entrance doors burst open with enough force to make several people gasp. A man strode through with urgent purpose, his expensive charcoal suit soaked from the light rain that had begun falling outside. Water dripped from his dark hair onto the polished marble floor. Conversations faltered and died. Heads turned. The man was striking, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that commanded attention even without trying. Victoria recognized him instantly, and her fork clattered against her plate with a sharp chime that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden hush. "Nathaniel Pierce," Owen whispered, confusion coloring his voice. "The tech billionaire. What is he doing here?" Victoria could not answer. Her throat had gone dry, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had not seen Nathaniel in person for nearly 5 years. Not since that awful funeral where rain had mixed with tears and nothing felt real. Anymore, Nathaniel's eyes swept the restaurant with laser focus until they locked on Victoria. His expression was grave, almost haunted, and without hesitation, he began walking directly toward their table. The other diners watched with unabashed curiosity, some reaching for their phones to capture what was clearly going to be a memorable moment. James Rivera, the restaurant manager, hurried after Nathaniel with apologetic gestures, clearly trying to intercept him without causing a scene. But Nathaniel moved with the single-minded determination of a man on a mission, brushing past attempts to slow him down. The confrontation, Owen half rose from his seat, instinctively protective, his body language shifting from relaxed to alert in a heartbeat. "Victoria, do you know him?" Before she could formulate an answer, Nathaniel reached their table. Up close, she could see the lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. This was not a social visit. Something was desperately wrong. "Victoria," Nathaniel said, his voice low but urgent, "I need you to listen very carefully. You are not safe here." The words hung in the air like smoke. Owen straightened fully now, moving slightly in front of Victoria in a gesture that would have been chivalrous under different circumstances. "I think you need to step back," he said firmly, teacher voice activated. Nathaniel barely glanced at him. "Sir, I understand this looks inappropriate, but I promise you I am trying to help. Victoria, please. I would not come here like this if it were not critical." Victoria found her voice, though it came out shakier than she wanted. "Nathaniel, what are you talking about?" "Safe from what?" He pulled out his phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen before turning it toward her. On the display was a photograph, grainy but clear enough. It showed Victoria leaving her architecture firm that very afternoon, Sophie visible through the car window in the back seat. The image had been taken from across the street, zoomed in with unmistakable intent. The blood drained from Victoria's face. Her hands began to tremble, and she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "Where did you get this?" "It was sent to me an hour ago," Nathaniel said quietly. glancing around at the watching crowd before lowering his voice further, along with a message. Vincent Ortega was released from prison 3 days ago. In Victoria, he knows where you live. The name hit her like a physical blow. Vincent Ortega. She had not heard that name spoken aloud in 7 years. Had worked hard to bury it in the deepest corners of her memory, along with everything else from that nightmare. Period of her life. Owen looked between them, clearly trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. Who is Vincent Ortega? Victoria closed her eyes briefly, the restaurant sounds fading into white noise. When she opened them again, Nathaniel was watching her with something that looked like profound sadness mixed with determination. He is the man who tried to kill me, Victoria whispered. The restaurant seemed to tilt around Victoria as memories she had fought to suppress came flooding back with brutal clarity. 7 years ago, she had been working late at her previous firm when she witnessed something she was never supposed to see. Vincent Ortega, a construction contractor with ties to organized crime, had been meeting with her former boss in the parking garage. The conversation had turned violent, and Victoria had seen Vincent strike the man with a metal pipe. She had testified. Vincent had gone to prison, and Victoria had spent the next 2 years looking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows, until finally the fear had faded into a dull background hum she could almost ignore. Owen's hand found hers under the table, grounding her. Victoria, talk to me. What is happening? Nathaniel pulled out a chair without asking permission and sat down, his movements controlled despite the obvious urgency. I know this is shocking, and I am sorry to interrupt your evening. But when I received that photograph and message, I tracked your location immediately. You were not answering your phone. Victoria fumbled for her purse, pulling out her phone to find it on silent mode. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Her stomach lurched. How did you even know to look for me? She demanded, anger beginning to cut through her shock. Why would someone send you information about me? The hidden guardian Nathaniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment he looked like a man carrying a burden too heavy to bear. Around them, the restaurant staff had begun gently encouraging other diners to remain calm, though phones were still pointed in their direction, and whispers rippled through the room like water. Because I have been monitoring Vincent Ortega's case for the past 7 years, Nathaniel said quietly. I set up alerts for his parole hearings, his prison transfers, everything. I needed to know the moment he was released so I could warn you. Owen leaned forward, his protective instincts clearly warring with confusion. Why would you do that? What is she to you? The question hung heavy between them. Victoria found herself holding her breath because she genuinely did not know the answer. She and Nathaniel had met only a handful of times, always in the context of his late wife Rachel's memory. Rachel had been Victoria's roommate in college, her closest friend, until a devastating car accident had taken her life 5 years ago. Nathaniel looked directly at Victoria, and she saw something raw and unguarded in his expression. Because Rachel made me promise. The night before she died, we were talking about the people who mattered most to her. She told me about what you had been through with Vincent, how terrified you were, even years later. She made me swear that if anything ever happened to her, I would make sure you stayed safe. Victoria's throat constricted. Rachel had never told her about that conversation. They had been planning to meet for lunch the day after the accident, just a normal Thursday afternoon catch-up session that never happened. Rachel knew she was going to die. Victoria whispered. Nathaniel said softly. She was just being Rachel, always thinking about everyone else, always trying to take care of the people she loved. She had no idea that would be our last real conversation. The threat emerged. James Rivera approached their table cautiously, his professional demeanor cracking slightly under the unusual circumstances. Mr. Pierce, I am going to have to ask you to either join these guests properly or leave the premises. You are causing quite a disturbance. Nathaniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to the manager. Call this number. Ask for Detective Linda Foster. Tell her Nathaniel Pierce is here regarding the Vincent Ortega case, and that Victoria Hayes needs immediate police presence. The manager's eyes widened as he read the card. Whatever he saw there convinced him this was legitimate. He nodded curtly and hurried toward the back office, Owen had gone very still, processing everything with the careful attention he usually reserved for analyzing complex literature with his students. So this man, Vincent Ortega, he threatened you after you testified against him? He did more than threaten, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. 2 weeks before his sentencing, someone broke into my apartment. They did not take anything, just left a note on my pillow. It said witnesses disappear. The police could never prove it was connected to Vincent, but I knew. That is when I moved, changed jobs, tried to disappear myself. Nathaniel's phone buzzed, and his face darkened as he read the message. There is more. Vincent did not just get released on parole. He was let out early due to prison overcrowding and good behavior. But according to my contacts, he has been asking questions about you for months. He has been planning this. The reality of her situation crashed over Victoria like a wave. Sophie was at a sleepover at her friend Bethany's house, safe for tonight. But tomorrow she would come home, expecting their usual Saturday morning pancakes and cartoons. How could Victoria explain that their carefully rebuilt life was under threat again? I have a daughter, she said suddenly, looking at Owen with desperation in her eyes. Sophie is 8 years old. I cannot let her grow up afraid the way I have been. Owen squeezed her hand tighter. You will not have to. We will figure this out together. Unexpected alliance, the phrase, struck something deep in Victoria's chest. We, he said we. As if her problems were automatically his problems too. As if 3 dates were enough to bind him to her chaos. She wanted to protest, to protect him from the mess her life had become. But the steady certainty. Nathaniel watched her. Nathaniel watched the exchange with something that looked almost like approval. She is going to need support through this. Vincent is not the type to give up easily. When I started digging after I got that message, I found out he has been working construction jobs under an assumed name, staying clean on paper. But his crew has connections to the same organized crime family he worked with before. How do you know all this? Victoria asked. You run a technology company. You create software and apps. Why do you have contacts who can track down criminals? For the first time, Nathaniel's expression shifted into something that might have been a sad smile. Because Rachel's death was not an accident. It took me 3 years to prove it, but someone tampered with her car's brake line. The person who did it had connections to the same family Vincent worked for. Turns out, she had been investigating financial irregularities at the nonprofit where she volunteered, and she stumbled onto a money laundering operation. The revelation hit Victoria like a punch to the gut. Rachel had died because she tried to help people, because she could not ignore wrongdoing, even when it put her at risk. It was so perfectly, heartbreakingly Rachel. I am so sorry, Victoria breathed. I never knew. Almost no one does, Nathaniel said. I kept it quiet because going public would have put targets on the backs of everyone Rachel cared about. But I have spent the last 5 years building resources, connections, and systems to protect those people. You included. Owen absorbed this information with the same measured calm he brought to everything. Victoria could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. So you have been watching over Victoria for 5 years without her knowing? From a distance, Nathaniel confirmed. Security cameras near her office and apartment building that feed to a monitoring service. Background checks on anyone who gets too close. Nothing invasive, just protective. I know how that sounds, but after losing Rachel, I could not bear the thought of breaking my promise to her. The choice detective, Linda Foster, arrived 15 minutes later, her no-nonsense presence immediately commanding respect. She was a compact woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Victoria had met her once before, years ago, when she first testified against Vincent. Miss Hayes, Foster said, her voice carrying the weight of bad news. We have been trying to reach you for the past 2 hours. Vincent Ortega violated his parole conditions within 6 hours of release. He cut off his ankle monitor and disappeared. We have reason to believe he is in the area. Victoria felt Owen's arm slide around her shoulders, anchoring her. What do we do? He asked Foster directly. The detective looked at Nathaniel with professional courtesy that suggested she knew exactly who he was and what resources he brought to the table. Mr. Pierce contacted my office with some compelling information. We are taking this threat very seriously. I recommend Victoria and her daughter relocate to a secure location until we can apprehend Ortega. Have a property outside the city, Nathaniel offered immediately. Gated community, private security, completely off any public records associated with my name. It is used as a corporate retreat center, but it is empty this weekend. Victoria shook her head instinctively. I cannot just uproot Sophie's life again. She has school, friends, her routine. She has finally stopped having nightmares about the divorce. She will have worse than nightmares if Vincent finds you, Foster said bluntly. This man is dangerous, Miss Hayes. He has already proven he is willing to break the law to come after you. Do not underestimate him. Owen turned Victoria gently to face him, his hands warm on her arms. Listen to me. I know you want to be strong for Sophie. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. But strength also means knowing when to accept help. Let us keep you both safe, Leas again. Victoria looked into his eyes and saw something that made her breath catch. This man, who had known her for barely 3 weeks, was ready to stand between her and danger without hesitation. And Nathaniel, bound by a promise to a woman who had been gone for 5 years, had been her silent guardian all along. Okay, she whispered finally. Okay, but I need to call Bethany's mother and explain without terrifying everyone. And I need to pick up Sophie tonight, not tomorrow morning. Detective Foster nodded approvingly. I will send an officer with you to retrieve your daughter, Mr. Pierce. If you can provide the address of this secure location, we will coordinate protection. As they stood to leave, Victoria caught sight of their untouched meals on the table. The romantic evening that had been so thoroughly derailed. Owen followed her gaze and gave her a crooked smile. Rain check, he offered. Despite everything, Victoria found herself smiling back. Rain check. Nathaniel held the door open as they filed out into the misty evening. The rain had picked up, turning the streetlights into blurred halos of gold. As they walked toward the parking lot, Victoria realized that her life had just changed direction again, pulled by forces beyond her control. But this time, she was not facing the darkness alone. The drive to Bethany's house passed in tense silence. Detective Foster's unmarked police car following close behind Victoria's sedan. Owen sat in the passenger seat, his presence steady and calm despite the chaos that had erupted around them. Nathaniel had gone ahead in his own vehicle to prepare the secure property, making calls to his security team with the efficient precision of someone accustomed to managing crises. Victoria's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white against the black leather. Rain streaked across the windshield in diagonal lines, the wipers beating a rhythmic pattern that did nothing to calm her racing thoughts. What would she tell Sophie? How could she explain that they had to leave again, hide again, live in fear again? She is going to be okay, Owen said quietly, as if reading her mind. Kids are resilient. And she has you? I wanted to give her stability, Victoria replied, her voice cracking slightly. After the divorce, after all the moving around, I promised her we were done running. I told her this was home. Owen reached over and gently placed his hand over hers on the steering wheel. Home is not a place. It is the people who love you. You are her home, Victoria. Wherever you go, that does not change. The simple truth of his words made tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away fiercely, refusing to let them fall. There would be time for crying later. Right now, she needed to be strong for her daughter. Retrieving Sophie Bethany's mother, Patricia, answered the door with a warm smile that faltered when she saw Victoria's strained expression in the police car idling at the curb. The 2 officers remained in the vehicle, trying to appear casual despite their obvious vigilance. Victoria? Is everything all right? There's been a situation, Victoria said carefully, aware that Sophie might overhear. Nothing dangerous right now, but I need to take Sophie home tonight instead of tomorrow morning. I am so sorry for the inconvenience. Patricia's eyes widened with concern, but she was perceptive enough not to press for details in the doorway. Of course. Let me get her. The girls were just watching a movie. Sophie appeared moments later, her blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail, wearing her favorite unicorn pajamas. Her face lit up when she saw her mother, then clouded with confusion when she noticed Owen standing behind Victoria. Mom, I thought you were on your date. Is something wrong? Victoria knelt down to her daughter's eye level, brushing a strand of hair from Sophie's face. We just decided we would rather have a sleepover with you instead. How does that sound? Sophie's 8-year-old intuition was sharper than Victoria gave her credit for. Her blue eyes, so much like her father's, searched her mother's face with unsettling perception. You look scared. I am just tired, sweetheart. It has been a long day. Can you grab your overnight bag? We are going to stay somewhere new tonight. Think of it as an adventure. The word adventure was their code, established during the difficult months after the divorce when Victoria had needed to make sudden changes feel exciting rather than frightening. Sophie's expression shifted into something more curious than worried, like when we stayed at that hotel with the indoor pool. Even better, Victoria promised, hoping it was true. This place has huge rooms and probably a garden. You can explore tomorrow. Sophie hugged Bethany goodbye, collected her backpack with its collection of stuffed animals and books, and skipped toward the car. Owen opened the back door for her with a gentle smile. Introducing himself as Victoria's friend, as they drove toward the address Nathaniel had provided, Sophie chattered about the movie she had been watching and the elaborate fort she and Bethany had constructed from couch cushions. Victoria made appropriate responses, her voice steady even as her heart continued to race. In the rearview mirror, Detective Foster's headlights remained a constant, reassuring presence. The corporate retreat Nathaniel's secure property turned out to be a stunning modern compound nestled in the hills 40 minutes outside the city. High stone walls surrounded the perimeter, broken only by a security gate where a uniformed guard checked their identification before waving them through. The main building was all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, warm lights glowing from within like a beacon in the darkness. Sophie pressed her face against the car window, her earlier anxiety forgotten in the face of such an impressive place. Whoa, this is like a castle. Nathaniel met them at the entrance, having changed into dry clothes and looking more composed than he had at the restaurant. His expression softened when he saw Sophie, and Victoria recognized the look. He was seeing Rachel and her daughter, the way Victoria sometimes did. Rachel had always talked about wanting children someday. Must be Sophie, Nathaniel said, crouching down to her level. I am Nathaniel. Your mom and I are old friends. Welcome to my house. This whole thing is your house? Sophie asked, eyes wide. Well, it is really more of a place where people come to work on special projects. But tonight, it is all yours. There are 7 bedrooms. You can pick whichever one you like best. A woman in her 30s appeared from inside, introducing herself as Monica, the property manager. She had kind eyes and a warm smile that immediately put Sophie at ease. I made hot chocolate, Monica announced. And I found some cookies in the kitchen if anyone is hungry. Sophie looked up at Victoria for permission, and when her mother nodded, she happily followed Monica inside. Owen went with them, giving Victoria a moment alone with Nathaniel. The confession they stood in the entryway, rain still pattering against the windows, the sound muffled by the building's excellent insulation. Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking exhausted. I never wanted to tell you like this, he said quietly. About the monitoring, the security measures. I always intended to stop once enough time had passed, once I was sure you were safe. But then the years kept going, and it became routine. I told myself I was honoring Rachel's memory, keeping my promise. Victoria studied his face, seeing the guilt etched in every line. Were you really doing it for Rachel? Or were you doing it because you could not save her? The question hung between them like a physical thing. Nathaniel's shoulders sagged slightly, and for a moment he looked like a man carrying the weight of the world, he admitted. I spent 3 years tracking down the people responsible for her death. When I finally had enough evidence, when they were arrested and convicted, I thought I would feel relief, closure, but I just felt empty. Rachel was still gone, and all my money and resources had not been able to protect the one person who mattered most. So you transferred that need onto me, Victoria said, not unkindly. You made me your project, your mission. I know how that sounds. I know it was not entirely healthy. But Victoria, you have to understand, Rachel loved you like a sister. In those last months, She talked about you constantly. She was so worried about you, so angry at herself for not being there more after the trial. She felt like she had failed you. Tears slipped down Victoria's cheeks now, the grief for her friend still fresh even after 5 years. She did not fail me. Rachel was the best person I ever knew. She always saw the good in everyone, always believed people could change and grow. She believed that about Vincent too, Nathaniel said heavily. She thought the prison system should focus on rehabilitation. She would have hated knowing that he came after you the moment he was released, that all her optimism was misplaced. Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Rachel would have told you to stop monitoring me. She would have said I needed to live my own life, make my own choices, even if they were risky. I know, Nathaniel said simply. That is why I never told you. I knew what she would say. Owen's understanding. They found Owen in the kitchen with Sophie and Monica, watching as the little girl selected the largest cookie from the plate. He looked up when Victoria and Nathaniel entered, his teacher instincts immediately assessing her emotional state. Sophie, why do not you go with Miss Monica to pick out your bedroom? Owen suggested gently. I bet some of them have really cool views. Sophie hesitated, looking at her mother. Victoria summoned a smile from somewhere deep inside and nodded encouragement. Once they were alone, Owen pulled out a chair for Victoria and poured her a cup of hot chocolate without asking if she wanted it. Drink, he instructed. You are shaking. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug, grateful for something to focus on. Nathaniel leaned against the counter, maintaining a respectful distance. Clearly uncertain of his place in this strange new dynamic, Owen looked between them, his analytical mind piecing together the subtext of what he had witnessed. This is complicated, he finally said. That is an understatement, Victoria replied with a weak laugh. But not in the way I initially thought, Owen continued. He turned to Nathaniel with surprising directness. You are not in love with her. You are in love with your late wife, and protecting Victoria is the last tangible connection you have to her. Nathaniel looked startled by the blunt assessment, then slowly nodded. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who spends their days analyzing human motivation and subtext, Owen said. I teach literature to teenagers. I am very good at reading between the lines. Victoria felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of tension she had not realized she was carrying. Owen was not jealous or threatened. He simply understood with that same clear perception he brought to everything. I should have told you years ago, Nathaniel said to Victoria. I should have asked permission instead of making decisions about your safety without your knowledge. That was wrong, regardless of my intentions. Yes, it was, Victoria agreed. But I also understand why you did it. Grief makes us do strange things. It makes us hold on to anything that keeps us connected to the people we have lost. Detective Foster appeared in the kitchen doorway, her phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call and turned to them with a grim expression. We have a problem. Vincent was spotted 20 minutes ago near Victoria's apartment building. He had a key and was attempting to enter the premises when a neighbor confronted him. He ran before our units could arrive. Sophie's laughter drifted from somewhere deeper in the house, innocent and carefree. The contrast between that sound and the reality of the threat made Victoria feel physically ill. He knows where I live, she whispered. If we had gone home tonight, if Sophie had been there. Owen's arm came around her shoulders immediately, solid and warm. But you were not there. She was not there. Everyone is safe. The resolution, Nathan. Y'all pushed away from the counter, his expression hardening into something determined and focused. How much evidence do you need to put him back in prison? Foster raised an eyebrow. If we can prove he was attempting to break and enter with intent to harm, combined with the parole violation, we can keep him locked up for a long time. But we need to catch him first. Then let us catch him, Nathaniel said. He wants Victoria. So we give him what he wants. Absolutely not, Owen said immediately, his grip on Victoria tightening protectively. Not actually, Nathaniel clarified. We set a trap. Make him think Victoria went home, that she does not know he was there. We have the apartment under surveillance, and when he comes back, you arrest him. Foster considered this, her expression thoughtful. That could work. We would need to make it convincing, though. He has clearly been planning this carefully. He will be watching for police presence. Victoria felt a strange calm settling over her, the clarity that sometimes came in moments of crisis. Use my car. Park it in my usual spot. Leave lights on in the apartment on the timer I normally use. Make it look like I came home and everything's normal. And where will you actually be? Foster asked. Here, Nathaniel said firmly. All of you, for as long as it takes. This property is not connected to Victoria in any way. Vincent would have no reason to look here. Sophie burst back into the kitchen, her face flushed with excitement. Mom, there is a room with a window seat, and you can see the whole valley, and there are a million stars. Can I sleep there, please? Victoria pulled her daughter into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Of course, sweetheart. That sounds perfect. New beginnings 3 days later, Detective Foster called with news. Vincent had returned to Victoria's apartment building just before dawn, using lock-picking tools to bypass the new security lock. He had been arrested without incident, caught in the act with enough evidence to ensure a lengthy prison sentence with no possibility of early release. The relief Victoria felt was profound, like stepping out of a dark room into sunlight. Sophie had been told a simplified version of events, framed as important police work that her mother was helping with. She had taken to the corporate retreat with the adaptability of childhood. Declaring it the best adventure they had ever had, Owen had stayed with them the entire time. Calling in sick to work for the first time in his teaching career, he and Sophie had spent hours exploring the property's gardens, creating elaborate stories about the resident birds and squirrels. Victoria had watched them from the kitchen window, her heart doing strange acrobatic things in her chest. On the morning they prepared to return home, Nathaniel pulled Victoria aside. They stood on the terrace, overlooking the valley, the early spring air crisp and clean. I am going to shut down the monitoring, he said. All of it. You deserve privacy, a life without someone watching over your shoulder, even if the intentions were good. Thank you, Victoria said. But Nathaniel, you do not have to disappear completely. You were Rachel's husband. That makes you family, even if it is complicated family. His eyes grew bright with unshed tears. She would have liked him, Owen. She always said you deserved someone who saw how extraordinary you are. She would have kicked you for the stalking, though. Nathaniel laughed. The sound rusty, but genuine. Without question, probably would have made me do community service, or something equally mortifying. Victoria smiled, picturing her friend's mock outrage, her insistence on natural consequences and personal growth. She loved you very much. She told me once that you were the best decision she ever made. I am going to start making some changes, Nathaniel said quietly. Maybe talk to someone about the grief, about the guilt. Rachel would want me to actually live, not just exist. She would, Victoria agreed. And she would want me to stop being afraid, to let people in, even when it is scary. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people bound by loss and love, learning to let go while holding on to what mattered. The future unfolds that evening. Back in her own apartment with Sophie tucked safely in bed, Victoria sat on the couch with Owen. The familiar surroundings felt different somehow. Less like a temporary shelter and more like an actual home. So, Owen said, his arm draped casually across the back of the couch. That was quite a third date. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and free. I promise the fourth will be much less dramatic. I do not know. I kind of enjoyed the excitement. Made me feel like an action hero. She turned to face him fully, suddenly serious. You could have walked away. This was a lot to deal with after only a few weeks. Most people would have run. Owen's expression was tender as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I teach high school English, Victoria. Do you know what that means? It means I spend my days with teenagers navigating Shakespeare's most complicated relationships. Romeo and Juliet, Beatrice and Benedict, Elizabeth and Darcy. I know all about love that requires courage, patience, and showing up even when things get messy. Comparing us to literature characters, she teased even as her heart swelled. If the metaphor fits, he said with a grin. Then his expression grew more serious. I am not going anywhere. Not unless you want me to. I know we are still new, still figuring this out. but I am all in if you are. Victoria thought about Rachel, who had believed in second chances and happy endings. She thought about Sophie, sleeping peacefully down the hall, finally safe. She thought about Nathaniel, beginning the hard work of healing. And she thought about herself. About the woman who had spent 7 years looking over her shoulder, afraid to trust, afraid to hope. I am all in, she whispered. Owen smiled and leaned forward, kissing her gently. It was a kiss full of promise, of patience, of a future unfolding, one brave moment at a time. Outside, city lights twinkled like scattered stars. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed briefly, then faded. Life continued its messy, beautiful, complicated rhythm. And for the first time in years, Victoria Hayes was not just surviving it, she was living it.